Good morning, boys and girls. It is Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern, if you are watching this live. And I will shortly be joined by the professor, Mr. Ed McCrae, with part 5 of our 12-part series. I want to give you a quick look ahead as, uh, as Ed has laid out for us the path that awaits us. If you've missed any of the episodes, they're all handy dandy in the playlist here. Saving Disney History with Ed McCrae. The man is a walking encyclopedia with all sorts of incredible information that you're just not going to find anywhere else. And I want to give you just a quick heads up on where we're going. Today's focus, I rudely cut Ed short last week, so he didn't quite finish up last week. So he's got some good information to go over as we kind of wrap up part 4. And then, so today, part 5, we're going to focus on Walt's patriotism. And then part 6, I believe, is the Disney that never was. So some fascinating things next week that never came to fruition, never became reality. And I'm really looking forward to that. So that's on February 10th. Then February 17th, we're going to talk about Disney legends, great folks that worked with Walt as his company took off and thrived over the years. And then I know that on February 24th, we're going to focus on Disneyland, the park. So that gets us through this month if we are able to stay on that path that the professor has laid out for us. And then, of course, we have several more episodes in March to get to. This will be a 12-part series taking us through Saturday, March 23rd, every Saturday morning live at 11 a.m. Eastern. And there he is, the professor. I almost wanted to call you Professor Emeritus, and then I realized, that doesn't really work. But I did come up with another Latin word. It's Professor Technica. So technically, you're a professor.
Well,
so
thank
here
you.
we are.
It'll be a shock to all the experts that don't like what I have to say.
Oh, right, brother. So take the floor, sir. And
All right.
what are we learning about today?
Well, we're going to finish up. I had a couple pages of notes left there, and don't worry about it. Sorry, I went over the time there.
Stop. I just have to. I have commitments with the
Okay.
youngest on the weekend, so it's all good, man.
I'm sorry about that, but
no, you're fine, man.
We started off to start off this with the woke stuff. One of the things that happened when they were doing all this woke stuff is PBS spent years doing a 4-hour documentary about Walt. They made it sound like it was going to be a lot of this stuff we have links to from last week. So just go back last week and you'll see.
Yes. Don't forget. That's a good point. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Ed provides just a wealth of links of his sources and videos that he references and stuff like that. I don't mention that enough. So anytime, Ed, that you have a link that you're referencing in the discussion and the presentation, please mention that, because y'all take a look underneath this video. A lot of great stuff from Ed every time.
Well, what PBS did was they got into the Disney archives and they made it sound like they're going to do this authoritative documentary, and they got a lot of people who were friends with Walt to be interviewed, and they actually did a 4-hour hit piece on Walt. And it focused a lot on the lies with the strike we're going to get into later. But in the links last week, like Floyd Norman was really angry how he felt manipulated by being in this documentary. And Raleigh Crump was another one. And just they just did this hit piece for 4 hours because it was on 2 nights.
Wow.
And it was a real disappointment because they did all the lies that come out of the strike, and they tried to say they were all true, and they had all the people that were like under Obama, the professor people that were trying to deconstruct everything in American history. They did that with Walt. They tried to say he was all about white America and all this, and it had nothing to do with the real guy.
Revisionist history, baby.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was. And the films were starting to decline. Like they John Lasseter was there, but he was bowing to what they would consider inclusion. And
this guy.
yeah, John Lasseter. And like they did Wreck-It Ralph a few years before, and Wreck-It Ralph was a decent film. It was like Roger Rabbit, where they'd tie in all the video game characters, and even the story kind of reflects the Christ story, because you had sin come into the game, there's into the world, and Wreck-It Ralph was going to sacrifice his life to save the world, and that's right in that first film. Well, when they did the sequel, they deconstructed everything everyone liked about the original film. They broke up the friendship that he had with the little girl Vanellope there, and they did the same thing with Toy Story. They broke up Buzz and Woody at the end of the movie. And you had with all these the princess movies, they they had it so where a princess no longer needed a man because that was the pro-feminist thing. But every time they did it, the people online would just start pandering. They wanted the characters to be gay, like Elsa and Frozen, and the girl in Brave, and Moana doesn't have a girl or a guy. I guess it could be a girl now, but that now Moana I didn't think was that bad because they took a myth from that culture and they made a decent movie out of it, and it was the guys that did Little Mermaid and Aladdin. They worked on that film, and they retired after that. But you also had a lot ever since Pocahontas. You'd have a lot of films where they would, in the name of inclusion, they would include details on paganist religions and things. Like Moana had the reincarnation thing. You had the ancestor worship in Mulan. But if you go before that, they'd have European cultures. You got the idea they were Judeo-Christian cultures, but they didn't get into the details. Aladdin, you got the idea it was a Muslim culture, but they didn't go into all the rituals and everything. And so, but after that, they started getting more and more bogged down into that. With Pocahontas on, they just got more and more bogged down into that. And I think that contributed to where we went with wokeism. And then you had they bought the Family Channel back in the 90s. You know, that Pat Robertson started that back in the 70s. That's why the 700 Club was always on there. I don't know if it still is now. But now,
yeah, and I recently learned a fun fact about the 700 Club, right?
It's in the contract. They can't cancel.
Right. It's always going to be a thing.
But I don't know if it's still there because I think he died recently.
Yeah. So, okay. All right. Continue.
Oh,
all right.
But, they changed the name of the Family Channel to Freeform, and the slogan is it's a different kind of family, and they have a lot of this Rainbow Jihad woke stuff on there all the time.
Oh, wow.
I don't watch it. I don't have cable anymore. But then you have Disney Plus, and the You Know It All's on there. They have like the drag queen stuff for kids and all that now. So and I think a lot of this, what was the shot over the bow was 2005, 2016, where you had Trump and all that come in, because everyone just went nuts after that. Just the whole culture.
All right, so 2015, 2016 is where we're at.
Yeah,
okay.
Because that's like when we, like I mentioned Perlmutter last week, he got kicked out of Marvel. He supported Trump. Well, what eventually happened with John Lasseter, Steve Jobs had died, so he was no longer there on the board controlling everything, because that was part of the merger. He was one of the bigger shareholders. And the executives were getting fearful that John Lasseter was getting too much power, so they started to plot against him. And he always, he would hug people. He would sometimes, it didn't matter what gender they were. And some people liked getting a John Lasseter hug because it was like a thing of approval. And he would sometimes grab somebody's knee in a story meeting, and it was either gender on that too. But he also he liked drinking wine, and he would drink a little too much at some of the events. And they had a handler that would keep an eye on him. And what they did was they took the Me Too kind of stuff, and they lobbied it against Lasseter, and they accused him of sexual harassment. And even some of the fans that see it like a religion now, Disney like a religion, they'll say Lasseter's not a very good guy. He needs to be canceled. And in some of the digital releases, they are erasing like his director commentaries and interviews and things off of the Pixar films he did. So he's being erased from Disney history too. Not everything, but some of it has been removed. And Lasseter got forced out, and even when he left, the woke mob was still trying to keep him getting jobs at other animation studios. And when they did the meeting where they fired him and said they were going to get somebody else, somebody at the meeting yelled, "Hire a woman next." And but one thing I want to mention about Lasseter: they never investigated anything. They never charged him with anything. It was just allegations were enough to get rid of him in the aftermath of Me Too. And if you go back to Walt's time, there was an animator who was arrested in a bathhouse for gay stuff. And the other animators wanted to fire him, and Walt wouldn't fire him. He said, everyone makes mistakes, and let's just see if he'll turn his life around. And why didn't they don't do that with like John Lasseter? Because Lasseter made them a lot of money. A lot of successful films went through him. When they hired him, they gave him the Jim Henson deal, where he was the face of Disney for a while. And who they replaced him with was Jennifer Lee. And in the links last week, we have some articles where she says things in her own words. And Jennifer Lee has no background in animation. She was a writer, and she was brought in for a 2-week temp job on Wreck-It Ralph and got herself onto other films. And she worked on Zootopia. She was a co-director on Frozen. She wrote Wrinkle in Time, and she's the one that took all of the Christian stuff out of Wrinkle in Time and gave an interview about why she did that. And everything now trickles down from her all through the animation department. And she wants to have, there was one interview where she said she wants 50% of the animation department to be male and female, and half of them have to be minorities and half have to be white. And if you don't have that many people in your pool, you'll never get 50-50. If by definition, a minority is not going to ever be 50-50.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I that's no way to run a business.
Well,
just, I mean, meritocracy is dead, you know.
Well, it's all about virtue signaling now.
Of course
and
it is.
Iger retired. They put Bob Chapek in charge. He was more hands off and everything. Then you had the stuff with the DeSantis with the grooming stuff, the grooming bill. And Chapek tried to do hands off, and the employees just revolted. And then he made statements against DeSantis and the groomer bill, and it just spiraled out of control. And now Iger's there, and he's the one that started all this woke stuff.
Right.
And a list of some of the things they've done since they got rid of Lassiter, and in the transition, they did the thing with Beauty and the Beast. They made LeFou gay. They did a movie about the Nutcracker. And you don't know the story about the Nutcracker. He's a prince that's transformed into Nutcracker. Well, they took that all out. It's all about a militant feminist thing. There's not even the Nutcracker is. They made the Nutcracker black, and he's like a supporting character that's not even. And his name's in the title. And if you ever read the original story, it's he got to be a Nutcracker because he broke a spell a princess was under, and the Mouse Queen turned him into a Nutcracker, and then she snubbed him. And it's like a very sad background for him. It's got a lot of pathos, and they took that all out and made it about this militant feminist thing where the mice are the good guys and the Sugar Plum Fairy is the villain. And so you had that. You had they did the movie Onward, and they made a big deal. They had this gay Cyclops character in the movie. And see, they would do all the stuff in the United States, but when it was on in films overseas, they would edit the stuff out of the films because they knew that those cultures wouldn't accept it. So it's just pandering. And they did this short called Sanjay's Super Fun Team, where it's like about a little Hindu boy, and he's playing with the dad's idols like the superheroes. And it gets into all the religion stuff with that, and it's like, well, where's the Christian version where it's the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost? They would never do that, but if it's with tolerance, it should go two ways. It should be a two-way street, and it's not. That's what
Onward. My gosh, I just saw this. Show it. Onward character here. If I can,
you might have to blow it up a little. That was the biggest image I could find.
Gosh, this is wow. Don't need that. Let's see if I can. See if I can get this thing to show up on the screen. That is that's creepy, and that just tells you the direction of the company. That picture alone. Look at that thing.
They stuck a line in there where she has a girlfriend and she tears her hair out because of the kid, and it had nothing to do with the story or anything. They just stuck it in there to virtue signal. And then the poster, that straight from the poster, they have the rainbow behind her like that. You know that's intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And in that film it was too bad because it was all about fantasy creatures that were like in their own world, like Monsters Incorporated, and they had to insert all this stuff into it. And you had with the Lightyear movie, they made a big deal because of the Ron DeSantis thing where they had the gay kiss in Lightyear, and they had it out and they put it back in, and Chris Evans was the voice of Buzz Lightyear, and he said that the people who are critical of the gay kiss in Lightyear, they're going to die like the dinosaurs. And he's Captain America in the Marvel films, by the way.
I know. Yeah. Get out of my face.
Well, Mark Ruffalo's the worst when you read what the stuff he did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they did the Strange World one with the non-binary character last year. Yeah, I didn't even see that one.
Yeah, let's see.
I didn't see Lightyear either, and I didn't see Elemental. They have a non-binary character in that.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Good.
don't they look nice together?
That's cute. Let's see here. Yeah. I'm trying to catch up with some of these pictures here. I'm having
Yeah,
some issues.
I did some pictures for everything that we're mentioning. That
Mm.
Luca film, people told me that is. I haven't seen it. That one is they said a metaphor for the Rainbow Jihad stuff too.
Did they really? Because I watched that. That was a good flick.
That's what
I
people have told me, but they said that was what was behind it. And then you had that one with the panda
really.
that
I didn't pick up on that.
I haven't seen it, so I can't
Mm,
say either way. I just know what I'm told by people in the industry.
okay.
I do
All
have
right.
that one on Blu-ray, but I never bothered to watch it. That was
Well,
probably the last
give it a
one I got.
shot. I would
Yeah.
love to know your thoughts on that. Yeah.
All right. And well, they did that one with the panda seeing red, and the director on
Oh
that
gosh.
said
Yeah.
that it was about a girl getting her period.
It's
That's why the
just
panda's
what
red.
are
It's like, why do you have to put all this stuff in all the films? Why can't they just be entertaining?
because they're trying to destroy kids.
I know.
Oh, here's the you mentioned the Lightyear kiss. So what is this
Well, they had a
this
lesbian
is
character in Lightyear,
oh,
and they
okay.
had him kissing it, I guess.
All right. All right.
I
Okay.
wasn't.
Can you
If they,
make a Disney flick without any kind of I mean, can we just leave all sex out of Disney
well,
and children's entertainment?
they'll claim that Prince Charming and the princess, that's sex in the films, but they never did it. You had them like the prince would kiss Snow White or Sleeping Beauty to wake her up, but they didn't really go to the lengths that they're going with this stuff.
Sure.
And you had with the television ones, you had Ducktales. They had a gay couple in that. They had two guys with a shirt. I think I've got a picture of that in there. I
I
think.
see this. What in the
Now
world?
I didn't see I don't have Disney Plus, so I didn't see the Ducktales reboot. But from what I know
Look
about
at
it,
this.
they did a lot of references to the things in the comics and the original cartoons. But then they had to stick this in there.
Okay.
And I guess you have to look in the background to even notice this in that episode, but I don't know. All this stuff you only know about it because they go to the media and they make a big deal that they're sticking all this in the films for inclusion.
Yeah, that's just it. Yeah.
You wouldn't even notice it if they didn't tell you.
It's not well enough where they can just kind of sneak this in and then go down to the bar and be like, check this out. You won't believe what I snuck in the background. No, they've got to make a press release about it. Come on.
I think they do that because they want the backlash so they can call anyone that's against it bigots.
Yeah.
There's just some things, when something's an all age story, there's some things that aren't appropriate to be in it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it's not just we're not just picking on the Rainbow Jihad stuff, but all this stuff they're doing. That's become the focus to virtue signal, and the stories and characters suffer from that. They did that one with the dragon. That was the last Disney movie I saw. It was Raya and the Dragon, something like that. And you couldn't even tell that was a Disney movie. It felt like it was a movie made in Japan. Well, they had a director from over there do it, but like the reason Disney films used to be popular around the world is they were filtered through American culture, and it was selling that all over the world. And it's like in Japan, there's a studio called Studio Ghibli, and that's popular all over the world because they're selling the lens of Japanese culture through their animated films, and that goes all over the world. And the Disney films don't do that anymore.
Think
They don't
about
stand for anything.
what you just said there. They would filter it through American culture. After you said that, I was just sitting here thinking, how do you define American culture anymore? Everything is so twisted.
Well, yeah.
And it doesn't even 5-10 years ago is unrecognizable
I
to
know.
today.
And you go back to the animated films they did in the 90s, and like they did Mulan, but they had Eddie Murphy in there, and that was the American culture in the film. And now it goes all the way back to Walt. We had Jiminy Cricket. It would be the American culture in the film. And they don't do that now. They say it's being inclusive and all this, and you can't define what a Disney film is anymore because they've destroyed what a Disney film can be.
Yeah, used to be a brand, man.
Yeah, it's not now. And your Gravity Falls characters, we only know they're gay because the director told us so.
Wait, what? What now? What?
You've got the pictures there to prove it.
Okay, let me see what we got here. You're scaring me.
The cops are a gay couple. That was from
come
the director.
on. Let's see if
and he said that the girl and Dipper, they're non-binary.
Oh gosh, get out of my face.
And that's right from the creator of the show. And nobody would have even thought of it unless
Nobody.
unless he's there they are.
Oh,
We're
come
supposed
on. I swear. No. Okay.
I put
What
those
else?
for you because you dressed like him the other day.
Yeah, I did. I dressed
Yeah.
like on my day job, Pat Gray Unleashed.
Yeah.
I dressed like, and of course, this is how life works. The day that I dressed up as Dipper Pines, and it was so awkward because I had the orange shirt and I had the blue sleeves. I had it pushed up all weird because I didn't have a vest, and then I had the hat. And that was the day that a clip of Pat went super viral. And then, of course, the camera cuts to me, and then you see me dressed like a cartoon character. Yeah, that was fun. So they said that. Let me see if I can.
Well, that's what he said. The creator of the show.
No, you can't. I love how they go back and look at me now. I'm really inclusive. My characters are this when you never established that in any universe before. So these are people trying to go back and rewrite their own shows.
It's like the people that go back and they try to say all these characters in the old cartoons were that way too. Like Bugs Bunny, Looney Tunes character, they try to say that when he dressed up as in drag, they try to say that that's his sexuality coming through. But the joke was he was always fooling whoever, like Elmer Fudd. He accepted him as being a woman that was a rabbit in drag. That was the joke. It wasn't anything to do with sexuality. And Bugs Bunny would do that in all the cartoons. But there are people, the animation people that have come through college in recent years, they'll say that's why Bugs Bunny was doing that. And Pixar did that short. We have a picture of that. It was called Out. It was about the two gay dads. And
oh yes, I've seen this.
see, I only know about some of this stuff because you guys on the Blaze have talked about it. Because I'm out of Disney fandom.
Yeah. So that speaks volumes right there. So you're saying that you, the Disney professor, you've spent your life loving this company, loving what it produces, and you're not alone in this, man. I think you're very emblematic.
There's people who worked for Disney and made films for Disney, and they feel the same way. They've left Disney and they have nothing to do with it anymore.
Gosh, it's just, that's heartbreaking because we're going to need good people to rescue the culture and rescue companies that have gone woke like Disney if we're going to steer this ship around.
Yeah.
And just to hear you say that, I totally get it. But it's just like, where are the good people that can rescue?
Well, they tried to be college professors, and they've all left that. A lot of them that I know because of the wokeism, because it all come through the colleges.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, the progressive spirit has really infiltrated.
One I know that was a professor, he got fired because he showed the Pecos Bill cartoon, and it has a scene where the Indians are painting each other for the war dance, and they're slapping paint at each other. And he said some girl screamed and ran out of the room, and they made a big deal about it, and they forced him out. And he found out after he was retired on Twitter, one of the sites, there was a thread where there were students in the class plotting to frame him for sexual harassment to get rid of him. And there was another professor. He was a Disney alumnus, and he started a program at a college. He was there for about 20 years, and they forced him out with all this wokeness stuff, and it affected his health. And there was another. You would want people like this to train the next generation, but this stuff's come through the colleges, and what we really need to do is start another college like Walt did and have these people teaching the next generation coming through.
Yeah.
Because that's why Walt founded Cal Arts, and Cal Arts now is that's where a lot of this stuff come through with the woke stuff. There's a show called Steven Universe, and that all come through there. And it's known as the Cal Arts style now. And you also have the Black Lives Matter kind of stuff with the Proud Family. You guys have played that clip on the Blaze on the shows, and I remember the original Proud Family, and it wasn't like that. I didn't really care for that show, but that's the one that the artist was bragging that she was putting her secret gay agenda in the backgrounds and everything, and she said they weren't allowed to do that before, but something changed. And what changed was Roy passed away, Roy Jr. That's why it changed. He wouldn't put up with that stuff. And I'd forgotten about this. There was that show Little Demon about Satan's daughter, and that's animated. It has Danny DeVito and Aubrey Planza. And I have a story about her. She somehow found her way following me on Facebook. And
Oh,
I'd post all these stories about the pro-life movement. And I guess she thought I was doing satire or something. But then when she figured out that I wasn't, she said I was gross and blocked me. And I didn't even know who she was. I don't know how she started following my page.
remind us when Roy died.
I think it was 2009.
Okay.
But it took a couple of years. You know, the stuff takes 4 years or 5 years to
Sure.
develop. So that had to do its course. About 2005 is when all this started trickling in.
Mhm.
And when they do job listings now, I was telling you off the air, they'll list the race, the gender, the sexuality of the candidates they want for the job position. And that's an animation. And some of us have secret forums where we talk to each other and we see these job listings. And it's considered legal by the union because they're looking for minorities. And I think that's kind of insulting to say that
absolutely.
they need a leg up because they're a minority.
And take out any kind of agenda to sexualize kids or to destroy the Disney name or anything like that. The fact that and I don't care what the agenda is, the fact that your lead is race and sex and all of these backgrounds to build
for the characters,
to build your employee base is absolutely it's first of all, it's offensive, like you said, but it's no way to run any kind of business regardless of what your product is. It's just,
and if you go back into Disney history, Walt always had minorities working for him, but they were always based on merit. He had artists from Asia, black artists. You know, it wasn't
find the best people, and if they're a certain color or certain sex, then okay, fine. But just find the best people for the job and start from there. It's ridiculous that we even have to say that, Ed.
Yeah. And that's what Floyd Norman will point out in some of his interviews, that he wasn't at Disney because he was black. He was there because of his talent. And he says that there were many jobs that artists could have, but there were no black artists that applied for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's right from him. He was there. He knew Walt, worked with Walt. He draws these great cartoons of a grumpy Walt from stories that he lived through in the studio. And I'll have to find some of those to
I'd like to see that.
There was one where
Walt.
Floyd ate his donut. Floyd was a young guy when he worked with Walt, and Walt was like, "Who ate my donut?" All mad, and so Floyd's there trying to down the rest of the donut before Walt found out. But now John Lasseter, he's over at another company now, and he worked on the movie Luck. That's on Apple Plus. I haven't seen that one. He did touch up on it. It was already in production. He kind of fixed things on it. But the first film that he's had a lot to work on with it, it's called Spellbound. It's coming out this year. Okay. And he's hired a lot of Disney alum people to work with him at this studio. So it tells you what they think of what's going on at Disney. Mm-hmm. And some of the people that are working with him, there's Rich Moore. He directed Wreck-It Ralph. Alan Menken is doing the songs for Spellbound. He did the songs for a lot of the films in the 90s, the animated films.
What is Spellbound going to be about? You don't have any art for that in here, do you?
There's one in there. There was a picture I found. It's supposed to be a fairy tale about a king and a queen that are turned into monsters, and the princess tries to break the spell.
Okay.
But the princess is played by the actress who's in the live-action woke Snow White. So I hope that it'll turn out. And the story's written by Linda Wolverton, who did a lot of the live-action Disney remakes. But she also did Beauty and the Beast and Lion King, with the scripts on that. And the cast for this film includes Nathan Lane, Nicole Kidman, John Lithgow, and Rachel Ziegler. And there's other films coming down the pipeline. Brad Bird, who did The Incredibles and Ratatouille and Iron Giant, he's got a film coming. He went to college with John Lasseter. So all these people that were at Pixar and Disney, they're all working with Lasseter now. And maybe they're going to make a new Disney out of this studio that they're doing. I think it's called Skydance.
Okay.
And meanwhile, at Disney, what they just did, they did the movie Wish, and it was supposed to be the origin story of the wishing star from Pinocchio. And what they turned it into was a film about taking down the patriarchy.
Of course.
And I don't think it did very well. I didn't see it.
Yeah.
They did a short for the 100th anniversary, and they have no gags with the Seven Dwarfs, and there's nothing in there from Song of the South. And I said what they should have done is have had Brer Rabbit jump out of a picture and all the dwarfs fall over themselves. Because they have all these little gags like that with all the characters interacting in the short. And I don't have a picture of that, so you don't have to look. But they in that short they just did, it's surprising what characters they have doing cameos, but they didn't use all the characters from their history, and they also punched up. They have characters from that Strange World film, and people don't even know who the characters are because I've seen that in the comments. So they're like, "Who's that character?" And over at the theme parks, there's talk that they're going to get rid of Frontierland and make it Indigenous People Land. It's not what it's going to be called, but that's the they're going to have like Coco have a ride in there, and Canto, and all these different films, and get rid of the things that are considered straight white male problematic. They always use the term problematic too on all this stuff.
I love this though. I say I love this. Poor choice of words. I finally found this the pictures that you had sent over of Proud, and
The Proud
just
family.
yeah, just the looks on their faces.
They look
at that.
angry.
Angry. That is
Yeah.
so not the Disney brand.
And that
We don't celebrate the history of hate.
That was a Saturday morning cartoon on ABC back 20 years ago. And they had that, and they had Kim Possible, same designers and everything. And it wasn't about race or anything back then, and now that's what they're leading with.
That's tragic.
And the other thing they do now is they say that the cartoon characters have to be role models for the kids. But what they've done culturally, you've erased real life heroes.
Yeah.
So now they want to replace them with cartoon characters. But what we'll get into pretty soon here is Walt Disney did live action in animated real heroes that existed. They did those for role models for kids. He knew they didn't just need to live off of fantasy stuff. And some of those stories don't end happily, and he still made them anyway, and they were Disney films. And I'm just making sure I got everything we did last week. And I mentioned the thing with the schools. I went through the same animation program as Dave Filoni, and he's running. He's taking over for Kathleen Kennedy on Star Wars.
Oh wow!
And he's doing a lot of the woke stuff.
Oh no!
So it's interesting.
I thought you were going to give us hope.
Well, and he finished before I started. He finished that semester before I started. So it's interesting. We went through the same program, and he's on that side, and I'm on this side.
Yeah. Okay, well, so much for that. I had this flash, this moment where you're like, "Hey, he went to the same school as I did."
Some people are hopeful that he'll change things, but they said on that Mandalorian, all the episodes he directed were the woke ones no one liked, and the ones that everyone liked were the one that that guy that directed Elf and Iron Man. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he did those. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, he's also Happy Hogan in the Iron Man films. He's an actor as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But what's so different now is you have them all leading with all this woke stuff and virtue signaling. But if you go back 100 years ago, all the Christmas songs we know, most of them are written by Jewish songwriters, and they didn't write Hanukkah songs. They wrote Christmas songs because it reached more people in the culture. And that's what they want to do. They had a capitalist way of looking at their artwork, you know. And you get a lot of the artists now, they'll complain that why do they have to work for a living? Why isn't it just given to them? And one of the things that happened with when Eisner took over, Roy Disney gave a speech somewhere, and he made a comment that Mickey Mouse is a Republican mouse. And Eisner just freaked out, and he had to put out a press release that...
Wait, who said that?
Roy Jr. I tried to find footage of this, but I couldn't.
I bet you can't.
Yeah, and... Eisner put out a press release by that afternoon that Mickey isn't affiliated with either party because Democrats buy Disney products too, and it's just so the opposite of the approach they have now, where they're saying, well, we don't want your business. I mean, they did that with DeSantis, and they just lost another case against DeSantis. So
yes, they did, yeah.
And like I said before, that whole thing with Reedy Creek. They didn't build Epcot as a city, so they shouldn't have had those special privileges anyway, because they didn't do what they said they were going to do that.
That's a great point. That is a great point.
That's always been my point on that. They didn't build Epcot as a city, so as a theme park, they should have forfeited those rights. And
Wow, yeah.
now,
Never thought of that.
now we'll get back to Walt today.
Da-da-da.
Yeah. So one of the things I have in my collection here, and this was one of the last textbooks that were in public schools for American history, 1912, before Woodrow Wilson changed everything. So Walt would have probably had a textbook like this.
How cool.
You can see how thick that is.
Wow.
And a good chunk of it is about American Indian history. And we're always told that all that stuff got erased from history, but it was there before Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the kind of textbook Walt grew up with. So this is going to be one of the things that informs why he did the kind of films he did, because he had the whole. And this history book, it looks at history through the lens of the Constitution. That's how all the chapters are in this book. And there was a reprint of it, and we tried to look it up a few weeks ago, and we couldn't find it. It's been scrubbed. I don't know how they did that, but
boy, that's wow. Okay.
That's how they would teach history. It was always through what this meant with this amendment, and
right.
And that's lost now. They don't do that now. But they also included the American Indians and the Black history. You've seen that history book that was Colored Patriots, the American Revolution, that was in public schools for decades, and that was pulled out by Woodrow Wilson. And all this come out because of Woodrow Wilson. And this was after Walt, so he was like one of the last people in that generation that would have had access to these things in school.
Did you just mention his dad? Because yeah, this is incredible.
Walts Dad was a socialist. And
this is a good picture if I can get this.
He was a member of the American Society of Equity. Now, we haven't heard that term until recently, but go back 120 years, that term equity was all through all these socialist groups.
Mm-hmm. There's Walt's dad.
That's Elias Disney. And he had a subscription to the Appeal to Reason newspaper, and that was the socialist newspaper. A lot of the political parties had their own newspapers. So Walt grew up in this environment where he was exposed to what socialism is. He knew what socialism was because of his dad. And he said that he used to imitate the cartoons when he would draw out of those newspapers. And he learned how to draw the capitalist as the villain and the socialist as the hero and all that. And Walt was asked why he was a conservative. In the 1940s, he was asked this, and he told this guy, when he was a boy, his dad he was a socialist, he was going to support the socialist candidate. And all these other boys in town, their fathers were going to support the Democrat. And what they did to Walt, I think he was 12, they pulled his pants down and they put tar over his privates. And Walt said from that time on, he said he would never vote for a Democrat. That's Walt's dad and his mom.
Goodness.
And he told that story at least 3 times, so it must have happened.
Oh, yeah. I don't think you'd forget that.
Oh no.
God.
And Walt's dad, he supported all these different communist figures. And
can I just for a moment here?
Socialist figures. I mean.
It is terrible and rough as the times we're currently living in are. As much as I hate that story from Walt's childhood of what happened to him with those kids, it almost feels good to think, okay, all right, 100+ years ago.
Wait till we get to the strike.
people treated others like crap too. So okay, that gives me a little bit of hope in a weird, twisted kind of way, you know.
Well, I found this the other day in history that Walt, when they moved back to Chicago, Walt worked in the post office for a time, and a socialist bombed the post office. And Walt said that if he'd been 3 minutes later, he would have died in this explosion. There were people that died in this. 75 people were injured in this explosion.
Oh man!
And it happened on my birthday. So.
Oh wow! Happy birthday!
My birthday meant something to him, I guess, because he said that he was protected through this explosion. And
do you know when? I'm just trying to. I'm looking at this picture here. I'm trying to get it up here on the screen. This is a really cool picture. When did Walt's parents die? Because I'm glad to see them.
His mom died in the late 30s. His dad died in 1940. And
cool picture there, though.
I thought that was nice because they were from the Civil War era, you know. And you think about that. here their son was this world famous guy, and he was famous for this mouse, and they probably took that photo. They didn't know what to think of it. Films were a novelty for them, His dad didn't like film. He saw them as frivolous. And his dad was always very stern. His mom was more lenient. That's what everyone always says. And the next photo you got there, it's the only time I've ever seen his dad smile. And this would have been 1940. He died the next year, and so the mother was already dead at that point.
I accidentally took it down.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
But yeah, you're right. Yeah, see, look, Mickey Mouse makes everybody smile. I mean, that was.
I don't know. I'd never heard any positive stories about his dad with the humor and everything. I said he was aloof and very stern, and a lot of that come from the background. He was a very strict Christian, but see that's where the socialism came from. It was like today where they try to say Christianity is socialist.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Christian nationalism. I mean that. It's so fascinating how they are trying to get that to come back around on the guitar.
Well, look at that video I shared from PBS this morning on Twitter.
Right. Okay.
I don't want to get into it, but take a look at that today.
Mm-hmm.
The last story I had about his dad was now you've got the photo of, we'll show that picture of his dad smiling.
Okay. The one with the mom and dad sitting there again?
Well, no, it's Walt and it's Roy and it's his dad, and there's a cake.
Oh, okay. Hang on a second.
The cake has Pinocchio on it.
Okay. Oh, well, I didn't know that was them. Okay, hang on. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is a smile, because he kind of had a little smirk with the
Mickey Mouse,
Right, but now this
proud of his boys.
Yeah. Hang on, if I could get this. Boy, when you have a screen, touch screen, it's so sensitive here. Hang on.
Well, I'll tell the story that I'm going to get to about his dad. His dad found out around this time that there was it was when the mom was still alive. There was a clerical error, and even though he'd been an American citizen for like 60 years, 65 years, they tried to say he wasn't a citizen. So he went through all of the process to become a citizen. They went to the judge, and back then, if you married somebody and they weren't a U.S. citizen, you lost your citizenship. His mom was born where Disney World is today. That's where his mom was originally from.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, that's Kissimmee, Florida.
Yes.
And that's his dad met her there because he was down there to pick oranges. And it's just funny because Disney World was, see Elias there in the middle, he's smiling. And I've never seen him smile other than this photo.
And so where did they immigrate from? I forget where you
said.
His
dad was from Canada. And he came with his parents down to the United States looking for work when he was a teenager. But he'd been involved in politics and everything, and he wasn't considered a citizen, and he didn't know that because he'd been involved in all this stuff. And Walt even said to him, "Why does it matter to you so much?" And his dad said, "Oh, the country's been good to me. He's been good to my kids, and I'm going to die an American citizen." So he went through the thing to do it legally, and they go to the judge, and the judge recognized the last name, and he apologized to Elias Disney. He said, "This never should have happened. I'm just going to vouch for you. You're an American citizen."
Wow.
And we'll link to it's in the links where this story is told, where Eisenhower gives Walt an award. And there's a photo of that. It should be the next photo.
Oh, okay.
It's the George Washington Medal from Valley Forge, and Walt was only the fourth or fifth person to get it.
Oh my goodness.
Walt told this story, and Eisenhower goes through all this praise of what Walt has done to the American culture, and he said that he's done. No one has done more in spreading the truths and the values of America through entertainment as Walt Disney. He went through all of Walt's patriotism and everything. It's all in this link that we'll have in our links here.
I see it now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Ike wasn't showing up in the thumbnail. Hang on.
Oh,
I gotcha. Hang on. That's cool. Let me get that. That's a really cool picture right here.
And this was the largest one I could find of it.
That's cool, man.
That was in the 60s, so Eisenhower wasn't president anymore.
Oh.
Walt had supported Eisenhower in the 50s, and they did the campaign commercial, I Like Ike, and we've got a link to that in our links, too.
So wait a minute.
And Disney Studios.
That doesn't mean that Walt came up with that slogan, did he?
I'm not sure who came up with the slogan, but the commercial was a Disney commercial. It's
Wow.
I Like Ike, and this is the cartoon. They're all parading through town. And there's the donkeys that they were rejecting, and they're all caricatures of the other candidates.
Well, Well, that really lends credence to Roy Jr. saying that Mickey was a Republican mouse.
Yeah, it does. And
Wow.
we'll show there's one more picture that's Walt with LBJ. And
Okay.
I'll tell this story too, where when Walt went to get this award, he supported Goldwater, and he had at the studio where they did live action, he had a golf cart he drove around in, and on the bumper there was a Goldwater bumper sticker. When he went to get this award, he knew that LBJ wanted to do it because he wanted the PR of giving Walt this award. Walt was known as like the only person in Hollywood that wasn't supporting him. So Walt wore a Goldwater button on his lapel.
Oh no,
and
bro!
LBJ said something to him about it.
Of course he did.
Yeah, and then Walt lifted up his lapel and he said, "Well, I could have put this on." It was a big round button that said "Go Go Goldwater." And the Disney family is embarrassed of this story, but I think it shows how he had an impish sense of humor, and he knew that LBJ was trying to use him for a PR thing, so he stood up to him,
Wow.
And he knew all these people, like with Nixon, where he told that story last week, where Nixon and the Secret Service and the monorail. What I didn't know the ending of that, where after they went around twice, the Secret Service was trying to get in the monorail. Nixon got out, the Secret Service got in the monorail. The monorail took off, and Nixon got out and he waved at him as he went by.
Oh
so
my God.
That was the punchline to that story, and because I shared that story, it kind of triggered people in the Disney community. But it's a true story. It's like they can't get over Nixon.
That is funny. That's funny stuff.
And I had some pictures in there of Walt in World War I, because we've talked about it before. We didn't show it. That's where he lied about his age getting to World War I.
Let's see here. World War I stuff. Let's see
here. It's still in that same folder with his dad.
Yeah, I see. All right, let me.
And while you're showing that, I'll give you some quotes that Walt said about patriotism. He said, "I believe that this spiritual and intellectual freedom which we Americans enjoy is our greatest cultural blessing. Therefore, it seems to me that the first duty of culture is to defend freedom and resist all tyranny." And here's another one. "I've been selfishly indulging myself in America as a U.S. citizen, enjoying all the privileges that one has as a citizen. And it's only times like this when you sort of wake up and realize what it means to be a citizen." He said that with World War II, with Pearl Harbor and all that. "Tomorrow will be better as long as America keeps alive the ideals and freedom and a better life." And then the one thing he said...
Cool picture right there.
Mm-hmm. Those were all when he was in France. And that was kind of a thing standing up to his dad, because the socialists were against World War I. And that's why Woodrow Wilson passed that law where if you spoke out against World War I, he threw you in jail.
See, again, you mentioned something like that in history.
History matters with this stuff.
Well, I understand, but what I'm saying is, you take a step back, and as rotten as our society is today, you hear something like that, like, oh, okay, so you could have been thrown in jail for speaking out against the war. You think, okay, all right, well, we're not back to that point yet. It's pathetic. Yeah, I know, bro, I got it. I'm just saying it's just this weird, twisted little glimmer of, okay, it could be in some aspects. In some aspects, it could be worse. Anyhow, continue.
We're not going to link to it, but after Walt died, Roy had Ward Kimball make an anti-LBJ ad, and it has some pornography in it, so we didn't link to that.
Wow.
Ward Kimball was a liberal, but he didn't like LBJ either because of the Vietnam War. A lot of the Democrats didn't like LBJ because of the Vietnam War.
Hold on, y'all, look at this picture here of young Walt. This is, wow, look at that. Man, that's cool, man. Mm-hmm. That's a cool photo right there.
I mean, if you think about it, he was serving there at the same time Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were in World War I, and you don't associate the three. I don't know if they ever met, but they were all serving.
Yeah. Okay. I got another World War I pic here.
Okay.
Hang on. What you got to tell me about this one here, because there's a lot happening here. I'm gonna try to get this zoomed in as much as possible here. It's got the cartoon and stuff.
What's he did cartoons when he was in the army. He was in a Red Cross unit. That's him that's him posing with a bomb.
Careful, bro.
and you just had that story yesterday about the bomb at Goodwill. And,
yeah.
Over there they're just some of the cartoons. They're kicking the Kaiser. He
Yeah.
submitted cartoons from there for newspapers, but a lot of them got rejected.
If anybody watching is unaware, what Ed was referring to is I do a Friday live stream, and we had a story of a hand grenade from World War II show up at a Goodwill donation bin. Whoops!
Yeah, show up with one of those at a Goodwill.
Yeah, right. Here we go. What do you give me for this? Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I put that one in there, because I've never seen that photo, and he's posing with a bomb. Who knows if it's live?
Yeah, I wouldn't be messing with it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But now we'll go to the studio strike. And,
studio strike. Okay.
This is why this really cemented Walt's conservatism. What happened with this strike?
Okay.
I mean, during the 1930s, this is Walt's perspective, and these are in the actual histories of some of these, the official histories by the leftists. So this is, even they admit this is what it was.
So we've got a lot of pictures in here. You may just go through. So these are in order. Is that right?
Yeah, they're in order.
Okay.
Let me set it up here, and then we can go through them.
Yes, sir.
Because there's a couple that are videos, and they're short videos.
Okay.
During the 1930s, Walt hired all these artists all across the country so they could make Snow White. So, and you think about it, that where could artists work? And there were not a lot of jobs in the Great Depression in general. All so right. Walt thought he was doing this service to these people by giving them jobs. Then he built them a brand new studio with the profits from Snow White. Had 20 buildings on 51 acres of land. And these animators were the best paid animators in the studio. This is one of the things we're going to show, where they kept guillotining Walt in effigy when they went on strike.
Oh my gosh.
And we have footage of that and everything. And Gunther there that's mentioned, he's Gunther Lensing. He was the lawyer for the Disney studio. He had been Pancho Villa's lawyer in Texas.
Oh, wow. Look at this, man. I mean, that is a guillotine. And
yeah, they hung Walt. They did this in effigy. They burned him. They beheaded him. They had him chained up and these people were doing this, and he was so good to doing all the, what we're getting into. He built the studio for him, and 20% of the profits from all of his films got shared with employees for bonuses.
Oh my gosh!
And they were the highest paid animation people in the entire industry.
Not good enough.
He built this campus studio. They had sports facilities, a restaurant, barbershop. They had 2 different sun decks for different genders. They had a gym. It was like a miniature city. They had a phone service system, a police force. They had their own electrical grid. The buildings were air conditioned, which was rare at that time. And he gave all these people free art training. And every other studio was unionized except the Disney studio.
I mean, the socialist movement, the communists were embedded in the labor movement from the beginning. I mean, this was something that
they try to deny that today.
Oh yeah, and this is back Grover Cleveland stuff, man. This is a generation before this.
In the early 1900s, they were blowing up places.
Yes. Yeah. Look at this right here. Who is this here? Is this Walt being decapitated in effigy there?
Yeah, that's a photo of it, but we also have it on film too.
Oh, let's play that. Hang on, let me go in.
Well, I got the film where they're coming up with the guillotine, then I've got the film where they behead him. It's the 2 MP4s.
Such good people, man. I mean, just the labor movement in America.
The labor movement people, they weren't made up all of the artists had been there from the beginning. They were people that came in from art colleges. They were young people, and that's who really started this.
I mean, this is you mentioned Woodrow Wilson. I mean, this is from that era. People that went to college.
And Walt started a company union, so they had their own union, but because it was the company union, the mainstream unions balked at that.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, that's supposed to be Walt. They're all wearing hoods. They got the shirts off like executioners.
What is it about radicals never wanting to show their face? It tells you everything.
Well, you know how I found these videos is when they went on strike last year. People were posting these saying that this should happen to Bob Iger.
Oh my!
And that's how I found these videos in the beginning. I'd never seen the videos. I'd read some things here and there. But whenever they have histories of the strike, they always try to say that the strikers were justified. But what justifies them making all these threats to Walt, trying to? I mean, those are like death threats.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
You can see why that shook him up.
I bet. I mean,
mean,
especially after all he did for them.
Yeah.
My gosh, look at this. Oh,
Now one
look
guy's
at
got a
that.
smile on his face when they're doing that. The guy on the left.
Yep.
And one of the things they were mad about is they were supposed to get bonuses for Pinocchio, but the bank shut off their the credit for Disney. But Walton Roy started selling stock in the studio so they could just meet payroll. It wasn't like this was a big wealthy place at the time yet.
Right.
And Walt started having to lay off people. And one of the guy that ran the unions in Hollywood, his name was Herbert Sorrell, and he came to visit Walt because one of the artists brought him in, and he threatened to shut Walt's studio down, make it a dust bowl. The tie-in with that photo you're showing is they did a movie called The Reluctant Dragon, so Walt is the reluctant Disney.
Wow.
And with that film, they got Technicolor to not make prints of the film. So doing this stuff was trying to bankrupt the Disney Studio, so you wouldn't even have a job if they bankrupt the Disney Studio.
They never think that through.
And
they never think that through.
I've got a speech where we don't have a link to it, but I read through it, where Walt gave a speech because the strikers were mad that Walt was training women to animate. And this was because World War II, they knew World War II was coming. So they knew the men would be drafted, so he was trying to train. It took a long time to train people. So he was training the women. Walt made a comment in this speech where he said that the men and women, if they do the same job, they should get paid the same wages for the same job. So that's not even a sexist thing.
That is hysterical. I'm having a tough time with this photo. Stand by.
When the strikers went on strike, most of the women worked in the ink and paint department, and they couldn't get across past the strikers. So they had to crawl through the storm drains to get into the studio. So the strikers called them sewer rats.
And wait a minute. That almost seems because the rat thing is
well, they tied it in with Mickey, but they were
right. But is
comparing them to vermin?
Well, here's what I'm wondering. When we worked in New York, whenever a labor union would show up outside of a building where scabs were, right? They would have a big blow up rat. I wonder if it all goes back to this.
I don't know. It might.
That's interesting.
Some of the footage, we've got a link to the video that in our links that they have, they're hanging scabs in trees, like they're dummies. They have scab written on the sign that they're wearing. And all these things where they accuse Walt of being a sexist, anti-Semite, racist, all this stuff, that all comes out of the strike. They were all lies told out of the strike.
Gosh.
There's a documentary that PBS did around 30 years ago where they had an interview with Bill Melendez. He did the Charlie Brown specials, and he was one of the strikers. Oh. And he tells a story, big smile on his face, that that Walt was a racist. They hired a Hindu guy. Walt didn't want him there because he was black. And they were like, well, no, he's Hindu. And they said that Walt fired him because he was black. If there was a Hindu artist at that time in America, you'd be able to find out who this guy was and check this story out.
Right.
And nobody ever thought to do that because it was Bill Melendez that told it. And even he admitted that he never thanked Walt for the training he got to be an artist because he didn't have to pay for that. It was all done for the employees. And what these photos of the strikers, a lot of the people striking weren't even Disney employees. They were people that the unions brought in to strike.
So that's been happening forever then.
Mm-hmm. And Dumbo was being made through this time, and they had to make this film so they could make money so they wouldn't have to close the studio. And they were trying to thwart Dumbo from being made. And the reason all this happened was because in the mid 30s, the FDR administration they strengthened a lot of the union laws.
Yeah.
And the FDR administration tried to inject themselves into this strike situation. Disney's turned him down. Walt had a nervous breakdown, so they ended up sending him on a trip. And they were even, this year was from when the Reluctant Dragon premiered. Some of the animators they dressed in tuxedos in their finest, and they picketed the movie. And one of those pictures, or I think it's called Art Babbit or Babbit, he was one of the ringleaders. He was the animator for Snow White and the Queen in Snow White and Geppetto and Pinocchio, and he was one of the top guys. and he was the ringleader of this strike. He almost got into a fist fight with Walt at one of the confrontations when Walt was trying to get into the studio. They would mob his car and everything when he would try to get to work.
Yeah, let's see here. This guy here drawing. Is this a Babbit guy you're talking about?
Yeah, he's drawing Geppetto there.
Mhm.
And there's another photo there. It might be I think it's called Art Babbit 1. That he's the one in the front leading them.
Is that not the same one that I just put up?
Yeah, it might have been.
Yeah.
But he was the guy in the front there. And
Okay.
it was hard to find a photo of him from that time. All the photos are when he was an old man that I could find.
Interesting.
But
okay, let's see here. You got a lot of great photos from this.
I just put those in there so you could just pick whatever you wanted because I
don't know. They're just all so good and historic, man. I mean,
they put the Disney characters on the picket signs.
Yeah.
And when Walt was sent away, they settled the strike, and after that, the atmosphere around the studio changed, and Walt never socialized with the staff the same way again, because before you'll find footage of him where they had like a studio baseball team. He was playing on it. He'd have them over to his house. They'd have parties with his pool and everything. The family.
I don't blame him, man.
And a lot of the strikers, they either left the studio because they didn't like how it changed afterwards, or Walt fired him. And they went and founded a studio called UPA. And this one gets all praised by all these animation experts, how it was this great studio. And what they did was with the UPA, they embraced communist art ideals.
There we go. All right.
Everything Walt did in those first 5 animated features, it was all representational. You look how lavish those films are done. And UPA was more graphic design. And the UPA style only caught on because in the 60s, the television animation, they figured a way to use that art style to do limited animation where they would do things in layers, like the Hanna-Barbera cartoons. Like the mouths would be in different layers, and they could hold the head, just change the mouth.
That sounds kind of lazy.
Well, they did that for economic reasons. That's the only way to keep animation alive. But UPA, all the communists that founded it, they ended up having to sell it in the late 50s. By late 50s, they went bankrupt. They even didn't want to have a main character with their shorts. They wanted to have different characters each time, but they found out they had to, and their main character was Mr. Magoo. But the first Mr. Magoo cartoon is more like a Looney Tunes cartoon. I've sent you that one before. It's called The Ragtime Bear. And there's gunplay, and he thinks he shoots his nephew, and this was all done by the communists from UPA, and they admitted they were communists. They just didn't like being outed by Walt. Because what ended up happening a little bit later was Walt was one of the there's photos of him testifying. He testified before Congress against the communists in Hollywood. And
yeah, I see this. Hang on.
We have a link to his testimony that'll be there. I've got footage of it. And he said at this thing, I am positively convinced that there was communistic agitation, leadership, and activities that have brought about the union strike, studio strike. And many of the strikers, they were official members of the Communist Party. It wasn't hyperbole. It was true. And the day that he did that testimony, it was the same day that Ronald Reagan did his testimony. And I can't think of the actor's name, but he was in High Noon and the Frank Capra movie, Meet John Doe. I can't think of his name now. I had his name on my tongue and I can't think of it. But Gary Cooper. They all testified. Ayn Rand testified one of these days. This was in the late 40s. Walt was one of the co-founders of the Anti-Communist Charter of Motion Picture Alliance. He was the first vice president. And I'll link to this too in their links, where it has their charter all about how they're using the films to push American ideals on the culture and to keep out communism. It's like the opposite of what's going on today.
Boy, that's...
And in the questions that are in these the testimony, the congressmen, they combine communists, socialists, and fascists as one group. So today we're told that fascists are right wing. Back then, no. They knew they were all one group.
Boy.
And then after the strike was settled, we get into World War II. Now, the experts today, they'll claim that Walt was against all this World War II stuff, but that's not true.
Oh, I like this here. Hang on.
Oh, go ahead.
Let me put this on the screen. This is a good, if I can get the quote to fit perfectly here. Let's see if this, oh, yeah, let me take me off. Boy, that's good stuff right there.
Yeah. I mean, and I really think that strike is what really cemented where he goes with his career after this. Because you had World War II right on the heels of that. In March 1941, before the war even started, he already had the studio working on doing training films for the Army and or military, and then they were doing Army insignia for the planes and stuff. We have a whole folder of those. You want to check out anything.
You sure have a lot of fun stuff in here.
Well, I took all the stills off of that Disney Treasures DVD of the World War II cartoons.
Right.
And if anyone wants to find that, that's worth getting if you like this history about the World War II and the cartoons. I like the one where Mickey's got the gun. He's got a machine gun. I think that's the first one in the folder.
I don't see him in there.
Well, it's in the folder. It says insignia. This is.
Oh, he's in a tank there. Look at that. He's in the tank.
This shows all the characters. The Disney studio would do things like this with the characters for the war effort.
There's wild.
Thumper. Thumper's even Flower. He's like the skunk. He was like a sissy, and he's even there.
That is awesome. Oh, I need a poster of this hanging up somewhere.
And that was the highest resolution picture I could find of that. I would like to get a higher resolution.
Wow, that's so cool.
And it was the day after Pearl Harbor that the Army moved in on the lot, and that was like I said in the previous show, that was to defend Lockheed Martin. Walt lost over a third of his artists because they got drafted to the military. But Walt convinced the draft board after they saw some of the films he was making that the artists were more valuable for the war effort if they worked for him, and they would come in their uniforms right there. They did top secret films as well. And these military insignia, he did over 1,600 of them through the war. The Disney Studios did, and they continued making them up through the 1970s, just not like what they were doing in World War II. And they were all different characters. These were posters they did. They did a lot of these posters where it was they would be hung all over, either through the United States or they would be hung in, depending on the subject, or hung on military bases around the world.
This is fascinating artwork, man.
Well, this is all stuff they don't want you to see because Bob Iger said that he lamented that Roy ever released the DVD set of a lot of these cartoons. Gosh. And Donald Duck was the most popular character, and he was used on more insignia than any other. And Walt said that because these children grew up with Mickey Mouse, he owed it to them to do this army insignia, military insignia. And they didn't charge anyone for this insignia. They did it as like a public service kind of a thing.
Man, the hardest part of my role in this right now is figuring out which of these great pieces of art that you sent over, man.
Well, I tried to just give you a selection there. You don't have to show it all.
No, it's so good though, man. You kidding me? This is great. All right, let's see here. What else we got?
I'll just keep going with the story while you're pulling them up.
Yeah, you keep going. I'll just
with the animated shorts, we'll have some stills of these, and some of them I have links to that'll be in our links. Joe Grant and Dick Humor were the main story guys at Disney at that time, and they did a lot of the stories on these films. Both of them were Jewish, by the way, and they did a lot of these anti-Nazi films. And people never really consider that because they always try to say Walt was anti-Semitic, but he wasn't. And one of the shorts they did was for the IRS. The IRS asked for a short to get people to pay income taxes because they were going to start pushing the income tax for the war effort.
I don't like that.
I know, but this was for the war. So
I got it.
I'll give an excuse for the war.
I got it.
They put this short together really quickly. It was Donald Duck being he was made to feel good about paying his income taxes. And when they showed the short to the IRS agents, they didn't like it because they wanted Mickey Mouse. And Walt told them he'd give him Donald Duck, and that's like MGM giving him Clark Gable, and he either they take it or leave it.
Oh my gosh!
And
leave it to the government to not be satisfied.
Well, then they tried to not pay Walt for doing this short to pay the income taxes. They tried to say he was a war profiteer, and he did it for cost. And they did a poll that 37% of the people that paid taxes that year paid it because of this cartoon short. And now it's a banned cartoon. And they were still showing this when I was a kid on TV.
This is fascinating. I have to think this one through. Hang on. Let me see if I can get this to show up here. Don't park trucks on the sunny side of the street.
Well, that's because there'd be a shadow.
Yeah.
They want you to park in the shadow so they wouldn't see the shadow.
That's intense.
There were tons of photos or artwork like that where that Hitler or the Emperor peeking over the sky or in the clouds, watching the soldiers do things like that. You'd have don't do this, don't do that, because it was people weren't thinking about that. I mean, who would think about the shadows of the vehicle?
That's wild.
Another short I've mentioned before, it was the Fuehrer's face with Donald, but we'll be linking to that one. And the original title was called Donald in Access Land or Donald in Nutsy Land. And what happened was they released this song that was written for the cartoon. It was in the Fuehrer's face. It was recorded by Spike Jones. He was kind of like a musical Mel Brooks at the time. And the song became very popular. We have 2 different music videos of this. They were kind of like music videos. They were played in theaters. So they changed the title to In the Fuehrer's Face after this song. And Oscar Hammerstein of the Rodgers and Hammerstein, he said it was the greatest psychological song of the war. And it won the Oscar. The short did, 1943, best short.
And I have that in here.
Oh, it's in there's a picture of it in the folder that says shorts.
Okay.
I think it's the shorts.
All right. Well, I'm hanging out in the World War II.
That's okay. You can just go wherever you want to go. Now, experts say that that short is a send up to American patriotism, but it's not. But you know how the experts are always these liberal people that want to deconstruct everything.
Look at this.
Postmodernism.
Look at this, Trevor. Hold on. Y'all, look at this.
I would love to have some of these posters,
No kidding.
That's my favorite one of the Army. That was on the military insignia. Isn't that great? And that's not even on the DVD. I had to get that somewhere else.
Mickey shooting with a smile on his face.
He's shooting Hitler.
And riding a bomb. That is awesome.
That would be a great T-shirt.
I've already thought about printing that and framing it and giving it to my son or something. I mean, that is so good. That is so good.
They were patriotic characters, and they reflected Walt's patriotism. And all the other studios did things like this too. Popeye was in the Navy during World War II. The Looney Tunes did cartoons with the characters where they were fighting Hitler and everything. There were a couple of Looney Tunes cartoons where Hitler was a character.
Yeah. Boy, look at that. Wow.
Well, another short they did was called Education for Death. And it was based on a book about what it was like growing up in Nazi Germany and how they were doing the Hitler Youth, making them into the super soldiers. And the guy that wrote this book, he lived in Nazi Germany from 1928 to 1939. So it's like you think about God puts people in the right place at the right time. He was there and he knew all the tactics they were doing. And he wrote this book. And the short just shows the whole thing where the parents have to go to the government to get the name approved for the child, and the child gets sick. The government threatens the mother for coddling the child. The teacher tries to indoctrinate the kid, and the kid stands up to the teacher, so they put him in a corner in a dunce hat. We're linking to this whole short, and the voice of the little boy in this, his father was put in a concentration camp, and that's why Walt had this child do the voice of the child in the cartoon, because he loved the story. And the family had fled to England. And the other short that World War II was Chicken Little. And this one they were still showing on television when I was a kid. In the original version, they did a spin on it where the wolf is Foxy Loxy. He's reading the Mein Kampf for the book on where he's getting all these ideas to manipulate the chickens and the birds, because they're supposed to be American culture, the community. And at the end of the short, he eats all the birds, and it shows all the wishbones in the ground. And when they did general release on that short, they changed the book to a psychology book instead of Mein Kampf. And they also did shorts where they had the three little pigs and the big bad wolf. The big bad wolf was the Nazi, and the three little pigs, they built, instead of bricks, they built their home with war bonds. And they had one of the seven dwarfs where they're spraying DDT to keep the mosquitoes away because the malaria was such a problem in some of these places, the jungles and everything. And they did a whole bunch of, for the American side, they did a whole bunch of shorts with Donald Duck in the military. And we're going to link to some of those.
Okay, cool. I can't wait to see that.
Mm-hmm. And all these were still being shown on television when I was a kid, except for the in the Fuhrer's face. And there was a character that the military developed called Private Snafu, and it stands for Situation Normal All Effed Up. And Walt didn't get to work on Snafu because he wanted the merchandising rights, so it went to the Looney Tunes. And that's where Dr. Seuss met Chuck Jones, and they eventually made the Grinch.
Oh, nice.
They met doing these Snafu cartoons, and if you look at the cartoons...
I need a shirt. I need that on a shirt.
You have to show some of these to your friends at the Blaze.
Oh my gosh. Seriously. This is incredible. Oh my goodness. Doc dropping a bomb off of a cloud or something.
Yeah. I just think these are great. And a lot of these were drawn by Roy Williams, who was in the Mickey Mouse Club with Jimmy Dodd. He was, the Musketeer. He was one of the main artists in this unit that drew all these insignia.
So this kind of artwork then would be on,
put it on planes, a plane, or they'd make patches, things like that. But what people would do is they'd write a request in that they would like to have this character on insignia, and they would send that in. And Walt's guy, I love that Dumbo dropping bombs. If you remember, at the end of Dumbo, there's a thing where his something where he's tied in with the Defense Department. It's one of the newspaper things in the montage at the end.
Okay. I mean, these are incredible, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just so many. You said so many.
Those are all from the DVD set, or most of them, except the Mickey Mouse one where he's got the gun. But they don't dare reprint these in the history books now. They do.
No. So look at that, man.
The other popular character was Pete. He was a villain, and he was the cat, and he was on a lot of insignia too. They said Pluto was the second favorite after Donald on the insignia.
Yeah, that's my guy, Pluto. Let's see here. I'm just there's just so much here.
Just whatever you want to show there. I'll just keep going.
Yeah.
Now there's a lost animated feature that Walt made because it was made in World War II, and this is why it shaped the end of World War II. And people don't ever give Walt credit for this. It was called Victory Through Air Power. And when I was a kid growing up, when they would have the list of the animated features, it was always listed in the list of the animated features, and now it's not. You'd go to like Media Play or the different stores that would sell the VHS tapes. They would have a list of all the animated features on a poster, and it was listed with all the animated features. And this was based on a book by Major Alexander Day Zavorsky. He'd come here during World War I. He was a Russian immigrant, and he'd fled the Russian Revolution, and he came to the studio to consult on the film, and he's in the film. He's a narrator on the film, and he presents his ideas of because of Pearl Harbor, why we need to focus on airplanes to win World War II, because that was kind of considered Buck Rogers kind of a thing to focus on airplanes, the way that they wanted to do this. And there was a general that he'd served under that he got discharged because he wanted to. He was General Billy Mitchell. He advocated air power where the future of the military went, and he accused the Army and the Navy of botching some of the tests in 1925, and he got discharged from the Army. He's court-martialed. And Pearl Harbor proved him right, vindicated him. They dedicated this Victory Through Air Power film to him. And the film was shown to FDR and Churchill when they were in Canada at one of their meetings, and it changed their whole approach, how they were going to fight the war from that point on. And Walt paid out of his pocket to make this film. It wasn't paid by the military. The distributors didn't want it. He had to go through United Artists to do it. That's Little Hiawatha there.
This is so good.
And how the film ends, it has an octopus that represents the Axis powers, and a bald eagle defeats the octopus. And I have a link to this film. It's on the Internet Archive if anyone wants to see it.
Gosh, I'm just trying to figure out what else to put up there. This is good stuff. What do we got going on here? Is this Daisy Duck and
Well, there was some in there where they were for the nurses that worked in the war.
yeah, that's this one for sure.
Yeah, there was one with Minnie as well.
Okay. Oh boy, this is
When
fun.
Walt was making all these shorts and things for the military, a lot of times he undercharged the government. It took him 4 years for the government to sort all this out, because nobody undercharges the government.
I'm just looking for the mini one you're talking about. Not seeing that.
Maybe
one.
I didn't put it in there. There's one where she was a nurse, but
What's this hippo guy?
well, the hippo is probably from Fantasia, so it's a woman.
Oh yeah, I see. Yep. This is good stuff. Hang on. I just love the bomb dropping by Disney characters.
Yeah. You never saw that in Disney shorts. There was Looney Tunes that would
No.
do things like that, but not the
No.
Disney characters.
Right. Okay.
Now, this Victory Through Air Power film, that was kind of the precursor to when Walt did the Man in Space films in the 50s.
Okay. Yeah.
And we have a folder of that, but I know you're having fun with all these too.
No, I'll get to that. Just you keep talking. Don't worry about me, Ed.
Well, the Man in Space trilogy, what never gets told, we have a photo of him in that folder. One of Walt's colleagues was named George Powell, and he had a very similar career track as Walt, and he did 2 films about Man in Space that were before the Man in Space trilogy, and he knew Ward Kimball and everything. They wrote each other. He was a fan of the jazz band that some of the animators started, and he was really the unsung hero of the space story. And I forget which general that is there with Walt. But with those Man in Space films, Eisenhower called the day after the first one aired, and he wanted a print to show the military so they could form NASA, because they didn't. Everyone thought this was all like Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, science fiction-y kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's one in there. The guy it's George Powell, or it might just be called Powell. It's like a yellow background to show you. There's Walt with the moon. That was done for to advertise for the Man in Space shorts, the trilogy.
Okay. I'll try to find that other one.
Okay.
Powell.
P-A-L.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Oh, here
There's
we go.
one there where he's with elves. It's from one of his movies. He did the movie The Time Machine. He did War of the Worlds. He started out as an animator with 3-dimensional puppets for Paramount Pictures. He left Europe to flee. He fled Europe to get away from the Nazis, and he set up shop. Those puppets, they changed all the limbs and everything on them. It was really amazing how they did these. They were called puppetoons. And
what kind of material do you know?
They were carved wood. He had all these doll makers come from Europe.
So so the arms could move though.
They didn't move. They would like
interchange them, take them off.
Yeah, they were interchangeable, so they could train anybody to do it. The legs, the faces, everything.
Incredible.
I mean, you just think about what kind of skill went into these shorts. I'll stick one in our links. He did one for Tubby the Tuba that was nominated for a best Oscar for best short, but it didn't win. But I think it was the first time that story had ever been animated, Tubby the Tuba. And but he did all these other films too. Like Walt got into live action, so did George Powell. That's him sitting in the time machine in this 1970s. That was the highest resolution I could find of that photo, but it's such a great photo because he's sitting in the time machine. That was it came out in 1960. That film, it still holds up, and it's based on the H.G. Wells book. And,
here we go. Look at that. Here we go. 2 years in the making. Destination Moon.
Destination Moon and Conquest of Space. Those were some of his first films that he did in live action. And it was because those had an influence on what Walt did, because those were the first films anyone ever made about realistic space travel. It even influenced Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry would acknowledge those 2 films. The Funeral for Spock and Wrath of Khan, it comes out of one of those 2 films. I don't remember which one.
How cool is this?
And you can't find copies of those films anymore for hard copies. I don't have those in my archive.
That's too bad, man.
Yeah, I'm always looking. Well, you don't want to. I don't pay hundreds of dollars for DVD, but that's what people, they just list them for that, but that isn't what they're going to go for.
Right. No, that's accurate.
So, after the war,
Hold on. Tell me about this here.
oh, go ahead.
What do we got happening here? Is this NASA getting ready to promote something? I watched this. There we go. All right, clear the set. We're gonna need to do the moon landing shot
that's
next.
from Destination Moon.
Okay, very cool.
But see, look how they painted the surface of the moon, because nobody knew what it really looked like, and it's not cracked like that.
That's cool, man.
I mean, Glenn's looking for a spacesuit. He should see if one of those still exists, because that was the first film where it was Destination Moon. That was the first film. It influenced the films Walt made. They had lunch together at Socialist. Walt helped him become an American citizen with Walter Lantz. Both of them sponsored George Powell. And there's another way where it's Walt's patriotism again.
This is cool, man. Good stuff. Good stuff.
And George Powell never gets written into the history. They had a gentleman's agreement. One of them would make 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and one of them wouldn't. And Walt ended up making that film, and George Powell didn't. He made Tom Thumb instead. And George Powell did a film called The Enchanted World of the Brothers Grimm, Wonderful World of the Brothers Grimm, something like that. It's been a lost film for decades, and they just restored it. Those are all books that tied in with The Man in Space. There's an episode called Our Friend the Atom. Walt supported nuclear energy is the future, and that's like a departure from what people do today.
Wow, this is, man.
I mean, when Walt built Disneyland, he did on his show, he had Tomorrowland as part of the package, and he did all these episodes as Tomorrowland shows, and they were always science centered.
Cool stuff, man.
Now, after the war, he did a lot of animated shorts of tall tale characters. I linked to all of them. I found all of them they'll be in our links, but I have some photos of some of them there. If you want to pick through them. He did Casey, 2 of them for Casey at the Bat. He did Pecos Bill. The Pecos Bill short has been digitally altered since the 90s, because Pecos Bill always had a cigarette in his mouth, and they erased the cigarette. And that's another thing. They always try to say that these cartoons make kids want to smoke and everything, but the same people that are saying that, they're okay sticking all this woke stuff in the cartoons now.
Yeah. God forbid they have a cigarette, but we can lop off body parts for sure.
But they're trying to have it both ways, see? They always put it on all the DVDs. They'll put a disclaimer about smoking now with all this stuff. And I mean, when I was in college, I did a joke where they tried to say Frosty the Snowman would make kids want to smoke. Well, Frosty can't smoke. He's a snowman. He'd melt. Mm-hmm. And they actually do that now in the products. He can't ever have the pipe in his mouth. He has to hold it out in his hand. And when they have the song, they take that verse out where the line where he has a corncob pipe. Now it's something about how he rolled his eyes.
Do you have? Oh, here we go. I found the Pecos Bill. But there's no, like you said, there's no cigarette here. So,
well, it's hard to find a high resolution one. The one we're linking to has the cigarette.
Okay, cool.
And Pecos Bill is a caricature of Will Rogers. He was a actor at the time. That was a record that probably came out in the 80s or the 70s. So he did Pecos Bill. He did Paul Bunyan, Johnny Appleseed, Casey Jones, Windwagon Smith. And then much later, around 2000, the studios made a John Henry cartoon. Now, Walt didn't make a John Henry cartoon because George Powell made one.
See, it's kind of cool how they were working together, to not compete. Like today, you've got the studios just kind of ripping each other off to try to.
Well, like I said, DreamWorks was doing that with Disney.
Right.
Now, George Powell, this one he did with John Henry, I couldn't find it to link to it because they pulled it online everywhere. But it was considered the first cartoon where they had the black characters portrayed realistically. And that's why Walt didn't make his version of John Henry, because George Powell already did it. It was an award-winning thing with all the black community papers and everything. They all praised this short. And it came out around the time of Song of the South.
So hang on.
It's interesting.
So did they remake it recently?
They did this around 2000. The reason it was made was because that Disney was going to finally do a release of Song of the South. And they made this John Henry short to show how the studio viewed race then and now, even though there's nothing really about race in the first song of the South, the original song of the South film.
So
but
here's
Maya Angelou said that they screened this for. They said she would not support them re-releasing Song of the South, and she would bring the studio to its knees if they dared try to release it.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, that short was released. It's on Blu-ray. There's a DVD of the Disney shorts, and that's on there. It's not a bad short, but that's like that. And then in the 90s, they did a film called Tall Tale that it had, and Paul Bunyan was against cutting down trees. So go figure that out.
Come on.
Yeah. But it was kind of like the Wizard of Oz. But what the high point of it is Patrick Swayze was Pecos Bill. And everyone likes Patrick Swayze.
Wow. So what year did that come out? Where Paul Bunyan was against chopping down trees?
And he wasn't a giant either. He was just a regular guy. It came out in like 95, 96. And what I remember about that was Subway was trying to compete with McDonald's at the time, and they did their own little kids meal when they had the little characters in the meal. I only ever got Paul Bunyan and John Henry. Didn't get Pecos Bill. But you don't think of Subway as having a kids meal like that.
I mean, I look at this. This is classic right here. This, if I can get this to open up. This is so good. Come on. Hang on. Wait for it. A little bit of Paul Bunyan as we know him and love him. There he is. Boom. Good stuff.
That's from the short. He did that one in the 50s, and the man who started the animation program where I went to school, he worked on that. It was George Nicholas. He worked on The Grinch too. He worked all the studios, did Flintstones and everything. He had passed away by the time I come through, and he left all of his stuff to the college, and the college auctioned it off. But I think he'd left it there for us to learn from.
What in the world? Why would they do that?
Well, they wanted the money over.
I guess so. Gosh.
Now, when I was growing up, I always thought it was strange that Paul Bunyan has no beard, because I always think of Paul Bunyan kind of looking like Yukon Cornelius.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Hang on. Oh, I just realized a new feature here.
Oh, what's that?
That might get the pictures up faster.
Well, there was one if you kept clicking right.
Yeah, I know. I thank you. I thought I had to open each individual. Boy. Anyway, cool.
Well, cool. One more thing in that folder. It's they did a short. It was a featurette. It was called Ben and Me, about Benjamin Franklin and a mouse.
Yeah.
This little mouse friend. We're going to link to that, and it even has a scene that's not on the DVD that has that. The DVD's out of print, but that short is based on a award-winning book called Ben and Me. My library had it when I was in elementary school. So I
don't remember it very well, other than I really liked it.
Yeah, and the same author did a book about Paul Revere and his horse. It was called Revere and I. Paul Revere and I. And it was very hard to find high-resolution images from that short anywhere. Now, interestingly, those characters, Amos the Mouse and Benjamin Franklin, they're in that 100th anniversary short that Disney just made in the background. And you wouldn't think that they would have bothered to put them in that.
Interesting.
But that short's about what the moral of the short is, how Thomas Jefferson was inspired for the opening of the Declaration of Independence. That's the high point. The music swells and everything at the end of that short. But you'd never see a short like that made today.
No. We can't have that.
Yeah, that's at the very end. And that's from that famous painting. And you can see Ben Franklin sitting there. Ben Franklin was voiced by Charlie Ruggles, and he was in a lot of the live-action Disney movies. He was in The Parent Trap. He was the grandfather.
Right.
But I'm going to get to the live-action films now, and everything filtered through Walt, like I'd mentioned in previous shows. So all this stuff that we're going to talk about is patriotism. It all come through how he felt about America. And a quote I have from Walt that he said at this time was, "I've always wanted to do American history. It's due. We take too much for granted in this country. I'm not really telling history, though. I'm telling stories about people. The history just happens to be going on around them at the time." And that was his approach on what we're going to talk about with these films. And now that was on the first episode of Disneyland. And a lot of the characters from the shorts are there. You see Ichabod Crane, and I don't mean to point because you can't see, but I figured out who all the characters are in that poster.
Oh, cool, man.
He didn't make all of them, but Feebolts, and he's there with the popcorn going off there near the middle, and there's Davy Crockett in Texas with a gun, and I think that's Sacagawea up there in the Rocky Mountains. You can see Storm Along on the whale on the far right. I just can't remember who they all are off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
I spent probably a half hour going through that poster trying to figure out who some of those were.
That would be a cool poster to have too.
Oh, I would love to have that poster because one of my projects I've been working on is with tall tale characters. So I have all these books on tall tales. They would have been the same kind of books that influenced Walt because they're all from before 1950.
Right. Yep.
And if you look across all of Walt's films, the theme of a lot of them, he has legal immigration, private charity, you don't get government handouts, civil disobedience against tyrannical governments. That's through the ones that just aren't historical films. But the first film that we're going to talk about is Davy Crockett, and you just go to that Snow White picture because that's going to tie in with this.
Okay.
Now, you remember the fairy tales that Walt did, they always open with a storybook. Now, I have Snow White there, Cinderella, and Sleeping Beauty. They all open with a storybook, and it opens up. Davy Crockett opens with a storybook, but this story really happened. It's true. But he still used that framing device to tell the story. You can just go through them. I'll tell the story of Davy Crockett.
Okay.
At the time of this, Walt wanted to do all these stories about tall tale characters, and the first one they just picked at random was Davy Crockett. And at the time, he was an obscure character, and they chose him at random to do Frontierland with.
Really?
And nobody really thought anything of Davy Crockett. He wasn't a popular figure. There were books they couldn't sell on him. And the story guys pitched it to Walt to do Davy Crockett. And they focused on realistic Davy. Walt had thought about, he wanted to do more fanciful stories with tall tale characters. And if you look through the original three films they did with Davy Crockett, he fights the bad Indians, but he defends the good Indians. He fights Andrew Jackson when Andrew Jackson wants to take all the land away from the Indians that are in the treaties that they're Indians, or that's their land. And because of that, he storms off to Texas to fight in the Alamo. And who Walt chose to be Davy Crockett was a bit actor named Fess Parker. And how he found him is he went to the movie, the science fiction movie called Them, about the giant ants. And they wanted him to pick the star of that movie. Fess Parker plays a cop in that movie, and he picked this bit actor in this movie. That's Davy Crockett. They filmed all these Davy Crockett shows on location, and that was unheard of at the time. They'd only be shown in black and white on television, and they filmed them in color. And when you look at watch these, and I've linked to them, what I could find of them, they're all sitting in the Alamo knowing they're going to die. And I mean, what you think about that? It's a Disney film, and it has an unhappy ending, but he still chose that because he knew kids need to have not just the fantasy and the fairy tales; they have to have the serious stuff too. And that's gone now from modern Disney. They don't tell serious stories like that and aim it at a family audience. And when the first episode of this aired, there was such a high demand for products. They weren't prepared for this because they didn't think anything was going to come of this. It wasn't just an episode they put out there. We did 3 episodes, and that was all it was going to be. The guy that did the products for Disney, he freaked out because all these people kept calling. He took the phone off the hook. So all these realtors were up. They were freaking out because they thought all their competitors were making the call with Disney. So the prices, they could charge more prices for the products. And Roy gave him a bonus for taking the phone off the hook for that. And if you take all the amount of products that were sold for Davy Crockett, it was the highest grossing anything ever sold. If you adjust it for inflation, it was over $4 billion in 2024 money. That's from Mark's Toys. There's a photo of it as well. It's a fort they did of the Alamo. And where I grew up, there were 2 Mark's Toy factories. There were only 3 in the United States, and 2 of them were in my area. And I always was hoping I would find one of these that show up at an auction or something, but I never did.
Gosh.
Because every once in a while, you'd see these Mark's Toys show up at auctions. And this Davy Crockett stuff was so popular that people were afraid that the raccoon was going to go extinct because they were selling so many raccoon skin caps because it was in the
Coon skin caps.
and
That's
they
awesome.
then they ran out of raccoon skin. They started selling other animal skins, and they were dyeing them to look like raccoon skin. Then they were selling paper raccoon skin caps. And Walt still kept an eye on merchandising. He said, like someone wanted to do a Colt 45 tied into Davy Crockett, and Walt turned it down because he's like, well, you can't. They didn't have that kind of gun at Davy's time, so that made no sense. So they didn't do that. And this isn't even counting that the $4 billion isn't counting non-Disney merchandise because Davy Crockett was a public domain character. He was a real guy.
Yeah.
So there was even more stuff that just the stuff that said Walt Disney's Davy Crockett was the official stuff from the film. And it so took everyone by surprise that you had congressmen from Tennessee and Texas giving speeches on the floor of Congress about Davy Crockett. And there were churches eulogizing after the Alamo episode aired, Davy Crockett. They were naming schools after Davy Crockett. Kids were begging Walt not to kill Davy Crockett.
Wait, then they would hysterical.
When people would go to the Congress to see do the tour, there was no statue of Davy Crockett in Statuary Hall, but there was one of a guy in coonskin cap and buckskin. He was a missionary named Dr. Marcus Whitman from Washington State, and so people just assumed that was Davy Crockett.
Oh no!
And the tour guides wouldn't correct him on it.
Oh, bro.
And all the elites and the leftists and everything in the newspapers and academia, they all railed against Davy Crockett as not being an acceptable role model for children and the historical Davy and all that. And the unions even smeared Davy Crockett because he was for American individuality and the unions were about the collective. So they didn't like Davy Crockett. And William F. Buckley, he told off a lot of these people. He was one of Rush's mentors.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that is said about this is that this was an important pop cultural event because it was so unexpected. It affected everything in American life. There was the song, the Ballad of Davy Crockett. It was a big popular song at that time, too. It was recorded by all these different artists. You'll even see this in Back to the Future. They have that playing when Marty goes to the past. And it was done by all these different artists. It was a very popular song. And this Davy Crockett craze, it revealed a lot about what America's values, ideals, and aspirations were at that time. And it aired twice on television. All 3 episodes aired twice. Then they put it out a third time in theaters as a feature film, and it did well for that. And it won an Emmy for Best Action Adventure Series. And they did a sequel series, but it was based on the Crockett folklore, and they brought in Jeff York as Mike Fink. And he was the perfect Mike Fink, but he was in a lot of Disney films at the time for the history films. And the Crockett craze just petered out just like that. And people were just stuck with all this merchandise they couldn't sell.
Mm-hmm.
They were going to do 2 more Davy Crockett shows, but they decided not to. The left claimed victory that they are the ones that killed the Crockett craze, but that's not correct. And Walt moved Fess Parker into the live action films. And he tried to replicate the Crockett craze, and I'll skip over some of those just so we can get done in time here.
Is that the...
We did it. The Saga of Andy Burnett, Daniel Boone, Zorro, and the Swamp Fox with Leslie Nielsen. He was a dramatic actor back then. He wasn't a comedic actor.
Uh-huh.
Westward Ho the Wagons is a band movie now, and that had Fess Parker in it. It's about all the pioneers going west.
It's a band, huh?
It was on DVD, and they quietly discontinued it.
Oh.
And it's because it has the Indians in it. But they were all real. Most of them were real Indians, but it also has that crying Indian from the commercial from the 70s that was Italian in real life. I think Iron Eyes Cody, I think that was his name.
Yes.
But he's really Italian, but he's in a lot of films back then as an Indian.
Okay. Wow.
But that was a CinemaScope movie, and that was a big deal for that time because CinemaScope, there were only a handful of CinemaScope lenses in Hollywood.
Oh, I see. So not even a chance that that's going to show up on something like Disney Plus.
I don't know if this one's on there, the Great Locomotive Chase, but we're looking to a making of Westward Ho! The Wagons and Great Locomotive Chase, because you can see the lengths Walt went to make these historically accurate. And the Great Locomotive Chase was based on a book about a real event where the Union Army went to behind Confederate lines and they stole a train.
Yeah.
And they all got caught, and it doesn't end happily. But Walt made this film. And in the intro for this, he shows the book he had as a boy from this story, and the cover is falling off of it. I mean, it was a very well-loved book. And he talks about how when he was a boy, he knew veterans were on both sides of the war. The whole theme of this film is about how everyone had to come together after the war as Americans. It's really a timely story we could use today. Instead of everyone that was in the Confederacy was a villain, because they all had to come together. I mean, it even has people die at the end of this film, the execution and everything. And that still has a positive ending, because it's saying that no matter how bad things get, you still have to come together as Americans. And if you want to go to the Johnny Tremain folder, that's the other big film he did at this time. And this was based on an award-winning book. It was written during World War II by Esther Forbes. And I read this book because of the film when I was growing up. And it's about a teenage boy in the American Revolution. And Walt made this film because he was going to add a fifth land to Disneyland, and it was called Liberty Street. And I have some pictures of Liberty Street in there as well. They didn't end up doing that, but this was the first film that was directed by Robert Stevenson, who became the main director of most of Walt's live-action films. And Walt hired him because he directed the TV episode of Miracle on 34th Street. You'll see this on a lot of the public domain DVDs at Christmas time. It has Uncle Billy from It's a Wonderful Life as Kris Kringle. That was the same director. And he aired this on his show a couple times. I've linked to the intros when he aired it on his show, because he'll tie this in with Robin Hood. But he gets the story right where Robin Hood was stealing from the government the money that was taken from the taxes, instead of stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, like everyone says today. And he did this with a lot with his films he made in Europe. He did Rob Roy, he did The Sword and the Rose, Young Dick Turpin, and The Magnificent Rebel. And he would go through the Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights. He would tie this all in with America. Now, those there, you got those with the hot dogs. It was a premium. And you could collect the little medals like they have in the film, but it had the characters from the film in it for Johnny Tremain.
Cool, man. Gosh, I'd love to have one of those.
Oh, I'd love to have all 6 of them.
Yeah. Nice,
and they did a thing with Mark's Toys with all the little characters from Johnny Tremain as well. And I don't have a picture of that, but I would love to have those. And he did a couple other historical ones. He did Johnny Shiloh, The Ten Who Dared. The Ten Who Dared, that's about the...
hang on. I got to go to this Swamp Fox, Francis Marion. Man, that's an unsung hero.
Now, what I've linked to all 9 episodes. I've linked to a playlist. It'll be in our links.
Okay. Very cool. But this was Leslie Nielsen. Huh?
Leslie Nielsen from The Naked Gun. It was hard finding pictures. I tried to get the largest ones there for you. Now, I really like the Swamp Fox, and what that deals with in there, there's a whole thread in there about the slaves and racism and everything. Where the British, one of his men is one of the slaves, and the British execute him, and they treat him like he was an equal. The Swamp Fox does. In real life, I don't know if that was accurate, but a lot of the episodes of the Swamp Fox are based on the real life of Francis Marion. They just tweaked a few things. I mean, he really did break his leg at a party jumping out of a window, and that's why he wasn't where the British rounded up all the generals in the war. And that's in I think it's the first episode. They only ever released 3 of the episodes on DVD. And there's one that focuses just on the women in the Revolution. Walt
Molly Pitcher. I bet he did something with her, because that's
I don't. Story. Well, he might have did that in the parks. He didn't in the films.
Okay.
One of them he did. We don't have to go in the folder, but it's on Disney Plus, but it's edited. It's called The Adventures of Bullwhip Griffin. And it's a comedy film about the California Gold Rush. It's one of the final films he made. And I didn't know about this one until I was in high school going to colleges, checking out colleges. And they had the Disney Channel at this one college I was at in the dorm room with all the other guys. They all had gone to bed. And this movie came out I'd never seen. I stayed up till like 5 a.m. to watch this movie because I wanted to see how it ended. It's a very entertaining movie. And it's Roddy McDowell. He's a butler that goes to the California Gold Rush. It's based on a book. It's not a true story, but the history in it is accurate. And Walt doesn't get a lot of credit for it. He did a lot of films about American Indians. There was one called Tonka about a horse that survives Custer's last stand. Light in the Forest, I mentioned before. He did one called The Little Outlaw. There was one, The Legend of the Boy and the Eagle. There was one about, and it's right on the poster where this is about an American Indian girl. It's called Run Appaloosa Run. It's about it's a modern story about a girl and her horse. And he doesn't get credit for any of that stuff. Now, if you want to, go into the folder for satire films, because this is how Walt got on at J. Edgar Hoover's crap list, and he got a folder started about him at the FBI. And that was one of the films that did it. And that is one of my favorite Disney comedies. I think that is the quintessential Disney comedy. If you watch,
yeah, tell me. I was just going to say, what's with Hoover then? Well, was this supposed to be him?
No. Walt would he put jabs and satire about the military and the government in a lot of these films. And the first one was The Shaggy Dog, and this was made after that. This is what started all those comedies that were still going on in the 70s. And this is when he flies into Washington, D.C., and there's this whole scene where the general is going to blow up the car over the Capitol. And the general those are all from the different branches. They're fighting with each other through this movie and trying to one-up each other. And this is that's the general that's going to blow up the Capitol. And
I don't think I've ever seen this.
You have to see this. This is one of the funniest movies, and I love the satire in it. The guy on his right there, he tells him if he blows up the Capitol, he's going to lose every senator and congressman in the United States. They do a close-up of the general's face, and he keeps counting to the countdown to blow up the car because it's an unidentified flying object.
Incredible.
And that's a Senate that he's in charge of the Department of Defense. He played a lot of government officials through his career. And they're the three branches are arguing there. And that's Ed Wynn. He was the fire chief, and I put a few photos near for this because most people don't get this. On the radio, he played a character known as the Texaco fire chief, and that's why Walt cast him as the fire chief in The Absent-Minded Professor. And it's a bit part, but it's a great part. And his son was the villain in this, Alonzo Hawk. And I have a photo here of it's Edwin's son and his grandson. They're all sitting in together, and they were all in this film in different roles. That's the grandson, Ned Wynn, on the far left. He had a little bit part, and that's Keenan Wynn in the middle. He was the villain, Alonzo Hawk. And then there's Ed Wynn, who was his father. And most people don't know that they were all related. The three generations there. That's him as the Texaco fire chief. He was a vaudeville star way back in the day. And that's how Walt knew who he was.
I got to see this movie.
Oh, you have to see it. And there's Walt with Ed Wynn. He just loved Ed Wynn. He was always sticking him in films whenever he could. And they did a sequel, Son of Flubber, just kept doing the same thing. They had an IRS agent in that.
I knew they were all connected, but man, I just never saw
that darn cat that had an FBI agent. But J. Edgar Hoover, he started a file on Walt because of these films, and most of the stuff in the file were reviews of these films. There's one in that folder. It's called Monkeys Go Home, and it was done it was going to be a sequel to a film in that folder as well called Moon Pilot, and it's about Dean Jones and Harrison Olive Farm, and he has chimps that pick the olives, and the unions go nuts against him. They vandalize the town and write stuff all over the walls.
And what movie was that?
It's called Monkeys Go Home. And you go back to what I was saying about the strike with Walt, that's probably why he made this film, because there's speeches where the unions are calling Dean Jones an imperialist capitalist pig. They tried to frame the monkeys. They have political debates. It was one of the last films Walt made. People say it's not a very good film, but he made it because of the studio strike. That's what that was the hook why he made it. Everything filtered through Walt. And it has a pastor in this too. He's a priest, and that plays a role in this as well. But There's also a satire short. There's no photo of it, but I linked to it. It's called Pigs is Pigs. It's a satire of government regulations, and that'll be in our links.
All right, that sounds very promising.
And,
Let's see here.
if you want to go outside of that folder there, the main one there, where it had that picture of the locket from Pollyanna, I'll tell that. Then we'll go to Disneyland real quick. Then we'll finish up with that.
Okay, so I go out of this, and where do you want me? What folder is it?
It's in the folder just for live action films, I think.
Okay.
It's the only photo that's there. In the film Pollyanna, there was this locket where they had the quote that was supposedly attributed to Abraham Lincoln, and Lincoln never said it. It was written for the film by the director. He wrote the film as well.
No.
And they sold these lockets at Disneyland, and the director happened to be there. He saw that they were selling them, and he called Roy and told him Abraham Lincoln never said that, and they recalled the lockets, and there's only about 800 that are still not recalled or accounted for.
How much do you think that's worth?
I don't know, but I would like to have one just because of the story. But see,
I mean, that's a terrible quote too. When you look for the bad in mankind, be prepared to find it. You surely will.
And Walt was a big Lincoln guy.
Yeah, I bet he was not happy.
Yeah, I never have read what he thought of that, but I'm going to tell two stories about Disneyland so I can get you out of here in time for your thing. Okay. Hit the Khrushchev folder in Disneyland. There's the Disneyland folder. There's Khrushchev. You know, Khrushchev was the Soviet premier that pounded his shoe at the UN.
And what folder is it?
It's the Disneyland folder. I don't know what the number is on the folder.
Okay. Oh, I got you. I found it. Okay.
Now Khrushchev, on the same trip where he did that speech, "We will bury you" and everything at the UN, pounding the shoe, he wanted to go to Disneyland, and the State Department refused to let him go to Disneyland. And he did this meeting at Fox. They had a luncheon for him with all the stars. And he threw a tantrum. That's Liberty Street that he was going to build with Johnny Tremaine.
Okay.
And look, I thought that was interesting. They're only open Wednesday through Sunday. I didn't know that.
Well, that is interesting.
Huh. I have the plaques here. Disneyland is dedicated to the ideals and dreams and hard facts of creative America. He did different plaques for each land. Most people don't know that, but there's the one for Main Street, and there's one for Frontierland I stuck in there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any links for those, but there they are if anyone wants to go back and pause and read what they say.
That is so cool.
And that was the flag where they did the opening day speech with the prayer and everything.
Oh, yeah.
The Liberty Street thing, this was going to be a major thing, but they ended up not building it at Disneyland. They built Liberty Square at Disney World. So when I do the Disneyland show, we'll talk about Liberty Street.
So I'm in the wrong folder.
Oh, no, right there. It's one Khrushchev. It's the first folder in there.
I missed that. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
My bad. Okay.
Khrushchev wanted to go to Disneyland. The government wouldn't let him go. They did the luncheon at Fox with all the stars. Frank Sinatra said, "Why don't we just gather up?" He called Khrushchev's wife an old broad. That's at the luncheon. So let's just throw him and the old broad in the car and take her to Disneyland. And Walt was all set for them to have him come to Disneyland because he wanted to take a photo op in front of the Disneyland submarine fleet. It was the 8th largest submarine fleet in the world. And 4 Soviet reporters went to Disneyland because the premier couldn't go. And they did a report on it that if Khrushchev probably would have loved to have gone to Disneyland. They said that Disneyland could never be built in the Soviet Union. And those reporters were never heard from again.
Boy. Wow.
If you want to, and there's the Nautilus. The subs at Disneyland weren't that, they didn't look like that, but they were replaced with that from the film. That's the actual sub. And they tore all these subs out of Disneyland, so you can't. That's an actual picture from the time. But they took all those out. People didn't like those. And if you want to go, the last folder to go into that. I think it's Lincoln. It's the Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln.
Okay.
It'd be out where the Khrushchev one was. And this is what this is my point with this is Walt knew kids needed role models and everything. And when Walt was a boy, Lincoln was his role model.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a photo in that folder that you can get to at some point where it's Walt as a boy dressed as Lincoln. And he made an audio animatronic of Lincoln, and he gave a speech. And he was originally going to do the whole Hall of Presidents, and they were going to be wax figures, but he got this technology of the audio animatronics, and he did this figure, and the head of the World's Fair saw it because Walt was doing different attractions for the World's Fair, and he wanted it in the World's Fair, so they got the state of Illinois to back it, and they put this in the World's Fair. People thought it was a real actor. That's Walt on the right there. When he was a boy, he dressed up as Lincoln and went to school. He recited the Gettysburg Address, and the teachers were so impressed with it, they had him do it to every class, and he did it until he graduated school. And that's when they were doing the Hall of Presidents for Disney World. But that was the original plan, the Hall of Presidents. But Walt only lived to see doing great moments with Mr. Lincoln.
Oh, you can tell that's Eisenhower right there. The lady's messing with there.
And one of the things that'll be in our links, that it'll be the original show of this, because Eisner changed the show in '93, and someone's recreated what the original Hall of Presidents show was before that. And it's on YouTube. We've linked to it.
Okay.
And I've linked to the audio from the original Lincoln show, and it was Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. They keep trying to take that show out of Disneyland, and every time they do, people are in an uproar because Walt built this ride. And he installed this in the 1960s, right before the turbulent 60s. So, that ties in with the times. Because Lincoln's known as bringing people together, even though that's not entirely accurate. But Walt told his friend Ray Bradbury about this robot. He showed Ray Bradbury the robot of Lincoln, and Ray Bradbury said, "What if somebody came into Disneyland one day and assassinated the Lincoln robot?" And Walt thought that was hilarious and told him to put it in one of his stories, and he did. And I made Floyd Norman laugh once because he did a cartoon of the Lincoln robot going berserk and chasing after a grumpy Walt. And then I made a comment. Luckily, the Imagineers made an animatronic John Wilkes Booth that they would let loose on an occasion like this to take care of the Lincoln robot. And at Disneyland at the time, you had to have a ticket to go into each attraction, each ride. Walt thought it was so important that the kids saw this Lincoln attraction. You didn't have to have a ticket to see that. And it had written in it, so the young people may have better knowledge of the man who plays such an important part in American history. Walt Disney invites you to be a special guest to spend a few great moments with Mr. Lincoln.
That's cool, man.
But they don't have realistic heroes anymore with, that's all the postmodernism. It's like putting termites into the house and tearing the house down and destroying everything. And Walt did all these films, and even in the theme parks, he did the projects where it focused back on American history. And, and it all come out of, like I said, this book that was around the time he was a boy, it had that whole section on American Indians and all the other groups and everything. And his films reflect that because he probably grew up in school learning those things, and they don't even teach that in school anymore.
Man, this is what a ride.
And the people that worked with Walt, they carried that on. I mean, the bicentennial was a big thing, and if you have time, you can show some of the photos of the bicentennial folder there. They did a big event with a parade and history and everything, and they had America Sings was a ride or attraction that did all the songs being a melting pot of American history. This is a souvenir book for the parade. It was America on Parade. There's photos of that in that folder.
What how old was Walt when he died?
65.
Man.
And everyone else in his family lived to be in their 80s. It's because he smoked. That's why they shouldn't erase that he was a smoker, because that's a cautionary learning experience. That if he hadn't have smoked, he would have lived into the 80s and he would have finished Epcot. Now, that's an interesting story there. That was the Olympic mascot in 1980. He was designed by the Disney company, and they had a character that was Sam the Eagle as well that was in this America Sings project. He's a little different in the costume, but you can tell that it's a Disney character.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they put all the characters on all the souvenir stuff. There's one that image there. That's adapted from a World War II image where they were dressed in military uniforms.
Yes.
There's Uncle Scrooge there as Benjamin Franklin, and they're signing the Declaration. There's Betsy Ross with Minnie. And you'd never see the characters doing this today.
Not a chance.
Yeah.
And that is depressing.
But the people that worked with Walt, they were still alive and they were still doing these things. This was all pre-Eisner.
Right.
And it's important. It's an important part of history and everything. And I don't have a photo of it, but they did the Main Street Electrical Parade at that time, and they had a float in that was tied in with the bicentennial. I think I've linked to the audio of this one, and it's excuse me. Burl Ives is the voice of Sam the Eagle in this. and they just do this stage show with all the songs being a melting pot with America, all the songs from all over the world. And when they built Splash Mountain, all of the animatronics except for Sam and the owl character, they all were in the ride for Splash Mountain. And you'll see some of the pictures here that you can recognize the characters that were in Splash Mountain. And they were all designed by Mark Davis, and he did he worked on Song of the South.
Right.
And these are all in the Showboat and Song of the South, or in Splash Mountain, and you've got the chickens all raising their arms, and that's one reason they built Splash Mountain. They wanted to do something with all these characters and animatronics. I mean, great storytelling drawings that Mark Davis did there. And if you look at the pictures of the parade, you'll see all the different races represented in this parade too. So people that try to say that people were racist and everything, well, why were they in the parade then?
Yeah.
They did this parade both at Walt Disney World and Disneyland. That's transportation. There's Minutemen and there's Black Minutemen there, and that's true, historically true.
Mm-hmm.
There were Black Minutemen. That's from the Olympics.
That's the end. Man, that's great stuff, dude. That is just so. Yeah, that's what stinks. That's why I asked you how old Walt was, and you had that extra fact about the average age in his family.
Yeah, they all
My goodness,
around 80, 79, somewhere in there. That's
I tell you,
his father lived to be 80
because the impact that he made just in 65 years.
Well,
you give him another 20 years or so.
Well, remember with Walt, he's remembered because he had that TV show, and that didn't start till 1954. So it's like the last 10 years of his life are why we remember him, because he's remembered as that figure that was on the show every week. Man. And I mean, and there was no other studio where everything filtered through the studio chief like they did Walt. It had his name on the company, and he wanted it to reflect his ideals and values. And I have all the quotes and everything where he said that's what he was trying to do, and it's all the exact opposite today.
Well, we look forward to all of the links that will be posted shortly underneath this video. So please share this video. Make sure that you've got if you've got friends and family that maybe they don't know the history, or maybe they're just big Disney fans that have understandably lost interest in supporting that company. They may just want the nostalgia that Ed is offering.
I only support the vintage Disney stuff.
Vintage Disney, there it is. That's good.
If they reprint vintage stuff or release vintage stuff, that's what I'll buy. I won't support the new stuff anymore. I don't support the grooming stuff.
Right. So this is part 5 of our 12-part series. They'll run through March 23rd. We do this every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. Spend a couple of hours with Professor Technica, Ed McCrae. Man, so looking ahead to next week, we got
the Disney that never was.
Oh man, I cannot wait. So this is actually going to be cool yet sad at the same time.
And I might also stick in some things from films that were made that they didn't put in the film, and there's a couple of those I wish were in the films.
Yeah, so this is going to be fun in a way, but again, sad as well, because it'll be the stuff that we almost had that never came to fruition, or hasn't yet, I guess. But Ed McCrae, thanks so much as always. People can reach out. There's your Twitter handle at real_Ed_McCrae. Mine as well. Please do reach out. Any questions you have. Ed's awesome. He's a great
I try to get to everything. I even on the videos where people are asking questions, I've been answering things on those.
So cool, man. You're awesome. All right. We look forward to part 6 next week. And until then, and by the way, Rob has organized everything into a nice playlist. So if you want to just share, if you want to just share the playlist, and it will continue to add on as each Saturday passes. Everybody out there, we are so grateful for your time and for your participation. Thank you so much. And everyone go out there and enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you back here in 7 days. And don't forget the Friday stream coming up, Friday Live, 2 o'clock Eastern on Friday. And I would tell you who the guests are, but that still hasn't been solidified.
I was just going to ask.
I got to send some text here to make sure that a couple of individuals are able to make it. So anyhow, thanks so much, Ed. Thank you to everybody. Y'all have a great one. Y'all take care.